From what I hear, he does have moments of lucidity, but only moments. Moments, Maomao repeated. She had indeed heard that people suffering from senility sometimes suddenly returned to their right minds. Onsu seemed to be suggesting that they should try to catch Big Lin during one of those spells. Indeed, Onsu said. Oh, Master Lacan is calling for me. I have to go. We can speak more about this later. He bustled back over to the strategist. This time the freak was out of juice. Maomao peered around the large sitting room. She saw the freak strategist, Onsu, and Big Lin, along with Big Lin's caretaker. Then there was herself, Chu, and Lahaku. Jinchi and his retinue were still nowhere to be seen. Might not have a choice this time, Maomao thought. If Jinchi didn't show up, she and the others would have to try to get the information themselves. It would be pointless to try anything, though, before the shogi game was over, so she decided to get more snacks instead. Miss Maomao, this fried bread is the best, Chu informed her. How many of those have you had, Miss Chu? I'm checking them for poison, she replied with a completely straight face. I can do that for myself, thank you. The snacks that had been provided were indeed very tasty, but the tragedy of it was that there was no wine at all. Yes, there was a food shortage. They were lucky to be able to eat at all, and they would just have to endure it. While the strategist was sipping his refilled juice, Onsu returned to the onlookers. Perhaps you would take this, he said, handing something to Maomao. What is it? She asked. He'd handed her a book. It was made with parchment paper, a collection of short stories. She would have preferred an encyclopedia of medicinal herbs or maybe a medical treatise, but this wasn't a bad choice either. I can bring you any other books you need as well. Or perhaps you'd prefer board games and cards, Onsu said. He was being so helpful toward Maomao and the others, in fact, that she was starting to get suspicious. Thank you for your consideration, but we'll be fine, she said pointedly. Are you quite sure about that? Onsu seemed distinctly ill at ease. Master Lacan and Big Lin began their game 2 hours ago and well. Yes. I think we can expect it to go on at least 4 hours more. 4 hours. You may wish to know that the Moon Prince was here just before you were, but he left again. He said he was quite busy with work. He told her to call him when the game was over. For Jinchi there was no such thing as free time. If working until the game was done was sensible, why couldn't Maomao leave too? There was plenty of medicine, doctor, you had asked her to make. Do you think I could get out of here? You can call me when the game is over, she said, collecting a tray of fruit and buns. They would make the quack doctor, lately beset by the woes of a snackless life, very happy. I'm sorry, but no. If you were to leave now, Master Lacan would lose his concentration, and if he were to make any unorthodox moves, Big Lin would get tired and fall asleep. Ugh, what a pain. Maomao did worry that after another 4 hours of shogi, the 80-year-old man might simply keel over. That was one more reason she couldn't leave. She would have to stay and make sure the old guy didn't collapse. She compromised as best she could. Her mortar, pestle, and medicinal ingredients were brought to her. She began mortar-ing with Chu and Lahaku while the old men played. Would that man last, she wondered. She crushed some herbs and watched Big Lin. His hand trembled every time he moved a piece. Sometimes the man attending him would press damp cotton to Big Lin's lips. Other times he would help Big Lin to his feet and take him to the bathroom. It looked like he was used to nursing. The other man must have been more than 40 years old, a son, or perhaps more likely a grandson. Big Lin's continued survival seemed to be thanks to this man's patient care. When Onsu came by to check on them, Maomao motioned him over. Who is the man with Big Lin, she asked. Some extended relative. Big Lin has no more close family. Master Lacan always refers to him as Small Lin. Small Lin, small could refer to a child, but it often meant someone who was small-hearted, a jerk. Even if it was just used with Big Lin, it still wasn't a particularly polite thing to call someone. In that respect, it was very much like the freak strategist to do. So time slipped through Maomao's fingers. After an hour they had filled a tray with round pills. Onsu seemed less nervous around them than he was with the strategist, and he was hard at work helping with the task. Maomao shook the tray to straighten the rows. At that moment, Big Lin slumped over. Shocked, Maomao rushed to the players. Oh, Maomao, the freak strategist said with a grin. She shoved him aside and went to tend to the other old man. Before she could even reach him, someone shouted, "Nothing's wrong." It was Small Lin, who propped up Big Lin and leaned in as the old man began to whisper something. Yes, Small Lin said. Maomao couldn't hear what Big Lin was saying, but Small Lin was taking it down. Maomao took a peek and discovered rows of writing whose meaning she could fathom. At length Big Lin's dictation seemed to end. Small Lin rubbed the man's back gently and wetted his lips with the cotton rag. All finished, Small Lin. the freak strategist asked with a glance at Maomao. He's exhausted. We should let him rest, Small Lin replied, evidently unbothered by the strategist's tone. He laid the elderly man down gently, then began taking a record of the state of the game board. Caretaking's not easy, huh? Said Chu as she grabbed another bun, this time from the strategist's plate, and stuffed it into her mouth. She sounded totally indifferent on the subject. Maomao worried for Gaeshun and Taomei in their old age. Maomao, cried a lilting voice. The strategist began to work his way over to her. Maomao frowned in disgust. Please don't get any closer. You smell like a dog that's been out in the rain. Wow, that really sounds hurtful when you just say it like that, Lihaku remarked. For better or worse, however, the personage involved was impervious to nearly anything Maomao might say. I heard you like salty snacks, so I made sure to have lots and lots on hand. How about some wine? Would you like some? I can get it for you. Wine. Just for a second, Maomao felt something tug at her heart, but then she shook her head vigorously. The scowl on her face must have been truly terrible because Chu intervened. If you're offering, Miss Chu would love some specially made fruit wine. Also, because we do technically have a job to do here, maybe you could tell me about the old guy over there. Ah, Chu, pleasure before business. From beside her, Lihaku could be heard to say, the wine can wait, thanks. The strategist, meanwhile, looked at Chu perplexed. The knight, you mean? He compared the man not to a ghost stone but a shogi piece. In other words, this was someone who stood out to him as distinctive. He was, as ever, an astute judge of character, if nothing else. If you want to know about my granduncle, please allow me to explain, said Small Lin, walking up. Big Lin was snoozing comfortably. Almost by instinct, everyone formed a loose circle around the snacks. Chu made tea and served it to the others. Maomao put individual plates in front of each of them, and she slid the various medicines and pharmaceutical tools to one side. May I ask what you've already heard about him? Small Lin said, regarding Maomao and the others calmly. He might not look like much, but he at least knew how to be polite. Onsu had said his family had fallen on hard times, but he at least seemed to have had a respectable upbringing. He even spoke courteously to Maomao and Chu. His granduncle, Small Lin, looked to be about 40 years old. His hair was black, but it looked temperamental, and his eyes were pale. Big Lin has something of the look of a foreigner about him himself. He had the angular nose people with foreign blood so often possessed. However, his thinning hair and eyebrows were white. It was impossible to say what color they had once been. What hair he had was unkempt. Perhaps he did not like to tie it back. It was unusual to see a man of Small Lin's age taking such close care of a granduncle. Did he really have no other relatives? I've heard him referred to as a living encyclopedia of the history of the Western capital, said Onsu. The strategist was meanwhile trying to press snacks on Maomao, so Chu interposed herself between them. Evidently she still had space left in her stomach, for the treats disappeared quickly. Yes, people called him that once, but now he is well, you see. He was in full possession of all his faculties until the events of 17 years ago. You mean the suppression of the Yi clan? Yes, Onsu asked, helpfully making sure Maomao and the others could follow. Maomao was glad she had gotten some of this story ahead of time. He really knows how to get things done. Onsu wasn't showy about it, but he gave a nudge here or a push there to keep things moving smoothly. He had not been in the service of a superior for very long, and that superior only knew how to upset orders and thwart plans. Yes, that is right. During the campaign he was attacked and hit in just the wrong spot. Small Lin lifted some of Big Lin's thinning hair to reveal a prominent scar. At the time, my granduncle had been charged with compiling a history of the Western capital. When the Yi were subdued, however, he too was taken to be a rebel. Perhaps we can count ourselves lucky that at least the rest of his family escaped punishment. A wrinkle formed in Small Lin's brow, a sign of how hard it was for him to recount these things. Suppression is a very lofty-sounding word, but it was no more than a rampage. My granduncle was arrested, and they burned not only the history he had compiled, but all the books and scrolls upon which he based his work. When he finally came back to us months later, he was like this. His closest relatives abandoned him. Only my father would take him in. Perhaps Big Lin's symptoms were the result of seeing his life's work confiscated and destroyed, or perhaps of simple violence. Being forsaken by his family might have been even worse. There was so much precious information in those records. To this day I regret their destruction. Small Lin pounded the carpet demonstratively. It is easy to burn things, it is not so easy to unburn them. Maomao's mind was still on the strange notes Small Lin had taken down as he listened to his granduncle. What did they mean? If he was trying to reconstruct the histories from the old man's mumblings, it would be a tall order. Onsu looked at Maomao as if to say that he was leaving the rest in her hands. As for what the freak strategist was up to at that moment, his face had turned red and he was getting tipsy. He was holding a glass bottle. Maomao was trying to focus on the conversation, but she could not avoid looking at him. Looks like he mixed up his juice and the fruit wine. It was clear to her that the strategist had mistakenly drunk the wine Chu wanted. Chu took the bottle from him, stuck out her tongue playfully and then started drinking. Come on, leave some for me, Maomao thought. She tried to send the message to Chu telepathically, but there didn't seem to be much hope it would reach her. Resigned, she turned back to small Lin. What do we need to do to reach Big Lin's memories then? She asked. My granduncle is a very careful person. For example, he would never have put all his books, which might so easily be burned, in one place. If you are looking for records, I'm sure he has hidden them somewhere. Meaning you think he had another library besides the one that was burned? Yes, I do. If Big Lin had kept copies of his books in another location, then the records might still exist. There was just one catch. If you haven't found them, it means no one knows where they are. That's right. No one has found this library. Even the idea that the books might all be there is simply a possibility. It was like clutching at mist, but at least the idea of a separate library had a ring of plausibility. Maomao looked at the old man who was breathing peacefully. The freak strategist truly was nothing but a thorn in her side, but every once in a while he could be helpful. I suppose then that you take advantage of his moments of lucidity to attempt to find out where the library is, she said. It would require someone with great patience to do such a thing. You really think you can find it that way? Chu piped up, coming right out with what Maomao was trying to hint at. Small Lin took a sip of his tea, as if unsure whether to say what he said next. Then he replied, in fact, they have been found before. Maomao's eyes went wide. Really? Indeed. I gather someone sought out the house my granduncle used to live in, based on the snatches of things he remembered. And when they found it, yes. What happened? There they were. Game records my granduncle had secreted away long ago, hidden beneath the floorboards. Game records, Maomao repeated. Frankly, that sounded pretty worthless. I'm guessing everyone was pretty disappointed after all that searching and everything. It seemed possible that these relatives had taken Big Lin in partly because they thought there might be a legacy in it for them. Yes, most were disappointed. I'm told they used the records for kindling in their oven. To think those papers had probably been priceless treasures to Big Lin. Value was in the eye of the beholder, and it could make life so cruel. Gee, that seems like such a shame. They might even be worth something if they were still around, said Chu, who was still sipping away at the wine. Seriously, she could at least leave a cup's worth. You are so right, Small Lin concurred. Someone even came to me who wanted to sell those game records once they heard how gifted my granduncle was at shogi. Sell them? Maomao asked. There was a scheme that sounded familiar. Oh yes, it seems that Go is all the rage in Keiru province, and there's a very popular book featuring collected games. This person wondered if a book of shogi games might meet with similar success. Maomao stole a glance at the old fart, who was now snoring placidly. Somehow the world continued to live in his shadow, though neither he nor the world knew it. His family was nearly frantic when they learned there might have been money in those games. But before they could figure out what to do, the swarm came. The family found out that Master Lacan was an old friend of my granduncle, S., and though I'm embarrassed to say it, they prevailed upon him to beg for help. Small Lin was red up to his ears, humiliated even to tell the story. Maomao was well aware that there were some less than ideal families out there, but the more poverty-stricken you were, the less sentimental you could be. If they had never fallen on hard times, they might have been a perfectly fine group of people. Perhaps it was Maomao's twisted personal viewpoint that made the devout, attentive Small Lin seem, in fact, the strangest of all. I think the rare pleasure of playing shogi with Master Lacan has brought some of my granduncle's spark back. I realize this may seem a rather impertinent request, but when the game is over, do you think the written records of it might be granted to us? I guess I don't see why not, Maomao said. The freak strategist didn't seem likely to care. Then, supposing that my granduncle's mutterings lead to another hidden cache of papers or old game records, we'll give all the game records to you. Lady Maomao Onsu said, visibly concerned. The freak strategist doesn't have any special interest in records of old games, does he? She asked. No, but if he were to say anything, just blame it on me. I certainly shall. Onsu had obviously just wanted to get a firm verbal commitment from Maomao. The man was thorough. That left only the crucial question of where these books and papers might possibly be. Do you still have those things you wrote down earlier? Could we see them, perhaps? Maomao asked politely. Here, I also have all the notes I've made thus far, Small Lin said. He produced a collection, not of sheets of paper or even wooden writing strips, but scraps of parchment. These look like game records too, Maomao said, puzzled. The scraps contained inscriptions like S59 and B83. Even Maomao, who had no interest in shogi whatsoever, recognized this as notation showing how the pieces in a shogi match had moved. This notation involved foreign numerals not used in Keiru province, perhaps for ease of reading. Does this seriously mean anything? Maomao held back a groan. Instead she turned to Onsu and asked, do you have another shogi board and some pieces we could borrow? When you didn't understand something, there was nothing better than to try it out. Onsu furnished the materials, and with a click click click, Maomao began to line up the pieces. Let's see. S59 would be. She tried to put the pieces where the notes indicated, but she increasingly suspected it was a futile endeavor. She was just about to place one of the pawns when she stopped. Now that's funny, Chu interjected, looking at the board. It says that pawn should move to row 2. Even I know that's an illegal move. Now Lihaku was getting in on the act. And there are 3 dragons too, that's not normal. Maybe not all of these notes relate to the same game, Onsu said, peering at the board. I wonder if this would make more sense to me if I knew more about shogi. You aren't well versed in the game, sir, Maomao asked. I know how to play more or less, but please remember whom I serve under. I'm not eager to turn a pastime into yet another job. Onsu had a dead look in his eyes. Boy, I feel that, Lihaku said, not looking much better. Why's that, Master Lihaku? You do not serve directly under the strategist. In fact, I do not think you have much to do with him at all, do you? Maomao asked. Lihaku was a soldier, true enough, but he saw far less of the freak strategist than Onsu did. Instead of answering, Lihaku said, look at this outline. Doesn't it remind you of a map of the capital? The capital? A city set in a perfect grid with the throne at the top. It is right there. I think I see what you mean. In short, Lihaku could not look at a go board without seeing the capital. This being a shogi setup, it is not exactly the same, but still, she understood what he was getting at. As a soldier who spent much of his time guarding the royal city, he saw a lot of maps of the place. Let's start by lining up all the pieces from the notes, Maomao said. There followed a series of clicks as she put the pieces in place, but they turned out to be distinctly clustered in one part of the board. Does this look like a shogi game to you? Not much of one, Small Lin said. He seemed to be the most shogi-capable person left awake. Big Lin and the strategist were both off in dreamland. It wasn't clear how much Chu knew about the game, so Maomao would discount her opinion. If it's not a shogi game, what do you think it is? Maomao asked, raising her hand in a gesture of total defeat. Yeah, the king piece is really flying around everywhere, Lihaku said. Miss Chu had the same thought. That Jade General really gets around. Maomao agreed with her companions. The Jade General, which normally moved one slow square at a time, had worked its way all the way to the center of the board. Jade, Maomao murmured, gazing at the board. Jayaku, the king, the opposing leader, sat smack in the center on the northern side of the board. A number of other pieces likewise seemed oddly out of position. Master Lihaku, Maomao said, yeah, if you were to picture this shogi board as the capital, how would it look to you? She turned the board so he could see it. He thought this king piece must represent the throne. This meant the clusters of pieces where they were all bunched up had to be the market or the merchant district or perhaps a residential area. What about the Jade General then? Maybe an enemy, a political enemy, or maybe it's the house of a particularly powerful bureaucrat. He didn't seem very sure. Yes, that would make sense. Maomao looked at Chu. Miss Chu, do you have a map of the western capital? Ha ha, Lihaku laughed. You say the strangest things. Who would carry a here you go? Chu pulled a map drawn on parchment out of the folds of her robes. Why do you have that? Lihaku exclaimed, offering the quip in place of Lahan's brother. Because I'm Miss Chu, she declared. Maomao knew she was, which was why she had asked. She had been right to do so. Maomao opened the map and compared it to the shogi board. Do you see the Jade General here? If you match it with the map of the western capital, doesn't it correspond exactly to this annex? The others almost jumped. Everyone crowded around, looking from the map to the board and back. The western capital, like the royal capital in the central region, had been laid out in a grid pattern with distinct sectors. But the divisions weren't as neat as those in the royal capital, so they'd missed the resemblance. Then that would make the king piece the administrative office or Master Jayakuin's residence, perhaps. But I would guess the office. That is the location of the mansion that the Yi clan occupied 17 years ago, Small Lin told them. It was so helpful to have a local around, someone who could fill them in on past events. That would explain all the dragons around here, Maomao said. If I remember correctly, there was a store with the word dragon in its name. Actual dragon designs were supposed to be taboo to everyone except members of the imperial family, but sometimes the word dragon would sneak into the name of a shop.